The blood on Eros Prime. Eros Prime was a painting come to life. Silver oceans beneath twin suns, the kind of place poets described as proof that humanity had finally learned peace. Families had come here to live without walls, without fear, without uniforms. Dr. Sarah Wells loved this world. She was a xenobiologist, not a soldier. Her greatest worry, until that day, had been whether her daughter's laughter might frighten the native bird life that nested in the coral forests. That was before the sky split open. The alarms came late, a ripple of static across the colony's AI grid, followed by a shriek of atmosphere as ships dropped out of FTL. Dark silhouettes blotted out the twin suns. The Tvar Dominion had come, reptilian mercenaries with claws like razors and a culture built on domination. They weren't here to conquer. They were here to send a message. Sarah grabbed her daughter, Lena, and ran for the shelter. The colony's defense drones lifted off, a pitiful swarm of silver dots against warships the size of cities. The first plasma salvo turned half the surface into glass. Through the chaos, she could still hear the AI announcing calmly, "Civilians, proceed to subterranean bunkers. Remain calm. This is not a drill." But the voice didn't match the fire raining from the heavens. Sarah reached the bunker gates just as the shockwave hit. She fell, shielding Lena as debris rained down. When she looked up, she saw the sky aflame, dropships descending, alien gunfire echoing through the colony streets. Inside the bunker, survivors huddled in terrified silence. They could hear the aliens outside, guttural laughter, the wet sound of bodies hitting metal. Then came the broadcast. Every holoscreen flickered to life, hijacked by the Tvar. Their leader, a scaled brute with amber eyes and jagged teeth, loomed into view. Behind him, human prisoners were bound and kneeling. Women, scientists, nurses. Sarah recognized one of them, her neighbor, Dr. Chun. The alien hissed in broken standard. "Human empire weak. You claim peace, but peace is cowardice. You hide behind law, behind mercy. We show you truth. You are prey." Then he reached down, grabbed Dr. Chin by the hair, and the feed turned to screaming. Lena sobbed into her mother's shoulder. Sarah forced herself not to look away. Somewhere, deep inside, the horror twisted into something colder, a hatred that had no bottom. When the Dominion ships left, they took the women. They left behind only ashes and silence. 3 days later, in orbit around Earth, Admiral Marcus Kael stood alone in the briefing chamber of the Terran Defense Council. The room was filled with senior diplomats, politicians, and ambassadors from the Galactic Council, all of them speaking in the careful tones of civilized beings pretending not to be afraid. A holographic replay of the Eros Prime massacre filled the air before them. Kael watched it without blinking. "This footage," said the Counselor of Peacekeeping, her voice trembling slightly, "is deeply tragic, but we must respond within the limits of interstellar law." The Tvar claimed it was a rogue faction. Kael's jaw flexed. "Rogue faction?" "Yes," another delegate added quickly. "They have expressed regret. The Council will issue sanctions. We advise restraint." Kael's eyes remained on the hologram. The moment when the alien laughed, when Dr. Chin screamed. His sister had been stationed there. Commander Alara Kael, medical officer, unarmed. He turned off the holo. The room went dark. "Restraint," he said softly. "That's what we're calling it." The counselor straightened. "Admiral, if humanity retaliates, you'll jeopardize our standing with the Galactic Alliance. You'll isolate our species." Kael's reply was almost a whisper. "Maybe it's time we stood alone." The council erupted in protest, but Kael was already walking toward the exit. His boots echoed against the marble floor, each step deliberate, heavy with purpose. At the door, he paused, just long enough to look back. "When I swore my oath," he said, "I promised to protect every human life. I didn't promise to protect the ones who butchered them." Then he left. Hours later, Kael stood in a private hangar beneath the frozen crust of Europa. The air was cold enough to crystallize breath. Before him lay the entrance to something buried and forbidden, a hangar marked Project Warhound, access revoked by council order. The biometric scanner flashed red, then green. "Welcome back, Admiral Kael." Inside, rows of black ships slept in the ice, their surfaces gleaming like obsidian. Each one was labeled with a single name: Nemesis, Judgment, Retribution, Ashfall. A voice echoed through the hangar, Commander Riasato, his old comrade, stepping out of the shadows. "You sure you want to wake the Warhounds, sir?" she asked. "The Council buried this project for a reason." Kael's eyes were cold. "Yeah, they buried it because they thought we'd never need it. And now—" He looked out across the sleeping fleet. "Now they've attacked our women, our scientists, our families." He reached out, resting a hand on the hull of the nearest ship. It hummed faintly, as if remembering war. "Turn them on," Kael said. "Every single one." Rhea hesitated. "If we do this, Admiral, we can't go back." Kael's gaze didn't waver. "Good." Back on Earth, in the ruins of the Defense Council's chamber, a single encrypted message pinged across secure networks. "To all Terran fleets, prepare for silent mobilization. Civil protocol suspended. Directive code, final warning." The message spread like wildfire across the stars, encrypted and unstoppable. Captains awoke to red alerts. Hidden stations powered up. Satellites aligned their lenses toward alien borders. Humanity, the patient species, the civilized species, was done pretending. And in the void between worlds, the Warhounds began to stir. The mask comes off. The Galactic Council summit hung in orbit above Eros Prime, the city world of diplomacy. Its towers glimmered in a permanent aurora, a monument to reason, compromise, and all the things humanity had once believed in. Admiral Marcus Kael arrived not in a warship, but aboard the modest Terran diplomatic cruiser Harmony. No escorts, no weapons, just a man in a dark uniform, stepping into a hall of species who now whispered about human savagery. Cameras tracked him. The galaxy wanted a spectacle, and Kael was ready to give them one. Inside the great amphitheater, hundreds of alien delegations filled concentric rings around a central podium. Some looked uneasy, others curious. The Tvar Dominion's ambassador, a reptilian giant with a voice like grinding stone, lounged in arrogance, flanked by guards in crimson armor. Kael ascended the platform in silence. His expression was carved from iron. Council Speaker Vorin, a crystalline being of light, began the session. "We recognize Admiral Marcus Kael of the Terran Defense Council, here to discuss the unfortunate incident on Eros Prime." Unfortunate incident. Kael felt his jaw tighten. He let the silence stretch before answering. "Incident," he repeated. "That's an elegant word for what was broadcast live to every human colony." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Vorin shifted colors nervously. "Admiral, the Tvar Dominion has offered reparations." "Reparations?" Kael's voice was calm, but it carried. "You think credits pay for burnt children? For women taken as trophies? For screams played on open channels?" The Tvar ambassador rose, scales shimmering with anger. "Careful, human. The Dominion does not answer to your emotional theatrics. War is the nature of expansion." Kael turned his head slightly, meeting the creature's gaze. "Then you'll understand when war answers back." The chamber erupted in overlapping languages, warnings, pleas, arguments. The speaker struck the dais for silence. "Admiral Kael," Vorin said, tone stern, "humanity is bound by the Galactic Concord. Retaliation outside Council authority constitutes a violation of—" Kael cut him off, his voice low. "Bound? We bound ourselves because we believed civilization was strength, because we thought restraint was noble." He looked around the hall, at species who had once called humans allies, now staring with unease. "For 2 centuries, humanity has played by your rules. We built, we traded, we forgave. And for that mercy, the Dominion slaughtered our civilians." The council debated. You debated, while my sister's screams were turned into propaganda. Vorin's crystal form dimmed. "We grieve your losses, Admiral, but vengeance will only breed justice," Kael corrected. "It breeds justice." A stillness fell. Even the Tvar ambassador hesitated. Kael's calm was more terrifying than shouting could ever be. He stepped closer to the center of the chamber, the light haloing him from below. Understand this. Humanity's peace was never weakness. It was a choice, a leash we put on ourselves for the sake of the galaxy. You broke that trust. You mistook silence for fear. He leaned forward, eyes sweeping the delegates. But make no mistake, the leash comes off now. The Tvar envoy hissed, mocking laughter bubbling from his throat. You wouldn't dare. Your fleets are outnumbered 10-1. The Dominion spans 50 worlds. Kael almost smiled. Then it won't take long. The alien's amusement faltered. Empty threats. Not empty, Kael said softly. Measured. He turned and began to walk toward the exit. As he passed the outer rings, hundreds of diplomats whispered, some in awe, others in panic. Just before the doors opened, Kael stopped and looked back. His voice carried through every open channel, every relay, every news feed in the system. You want humanity civilized? Then keep your claws off our women, your fleets off our colonies, and your lies off our networks. Because if you touch another innocent, we stop pretending to be civil. He left without another word. That night, on a restricted frequency hidden deep beneath Europa's ice crust, Commander Riasato waited by the terminal. The encrypted signal flickered to life, a single Terran defense emblem with Kael's voice over it. Warhound protocols authorized. Activate Nemesis. Sato's blood ran cold. The line crackled. Sir, Nemesis is still in dormant phase. It was never meant to be. Then wake her, Kael interrupted. They've made it clear what mercy earns us. On the screens before her, code cascaded. Artificial intelligence constructs flickered awake. Black networks of logic designed for psychological warfare, counter-command disruption, and total communications dominance. Within seconds, entire Terran networks vanished from the galactic grid. To outsiders, it looked like humanity had gone dark. To insiders, it meant something else. Humanity was going quiet. The hunters were leaving the light. Aboard the Harmony, Kael watched from his private cabin as the ship left orbit. Through the viewport, Eros Prime's aurora shimmered like a dying halo. He thought of Alara, his sister's voice caught forever in a half-corrupted recording. Her laughter, her last breath. He thought of Sarah Wells and her daughter, hiding while the sky burned. And he thought of every human diplomat who still believed the Council's laws would save them. Kael poured a drink and stared into the glass. We gave them civility, he murmured. We gave them peace. He finished the drink, set it down, and whispered the truth that would soon echo across the stars. Now we give them memory. Outside, the Harmony's engines ignited, its signal vanishing into the void. Behind it, the galactic news feeds tried to spin the story. Terran delegate expresses concern. Situation under control. But in the shadows, Project Warhound was awake. And for the first time in 2 centuries, the galaxy felt what humanity had spent generations hiding. The quiet, steady heartbeat of a species that had survived extinction before and was ready to become extinction for someone else. Project Warhound Unleashed. The first far world went dark without a sound. No invasion. No broadcasts. Just silence. The Galactic Council received fragmented sensor data, bursts of heat signatures, radiation spikes, then nothing. The Dominion claimed technical faults. But deep in the surveillance cores of neutral space stations, ghost images remained. Flashes of light, atmospheric ignition, and shadows shaped like ships that shouldn't exist. Human ships. They moved without transponders. They burned no fuel. They appeared for milliseconds, struck, and vanished again. It began. In the depths of Europa's ice crust, Commander Riasato stood before the glowing neural lattice of Nemesis. The AI's voice was a whisper threaded with static, female, calm, and predatory. Directive received. Initiating Warhound operations. Do you wish to confirm authorization for unrestricted engagement? Sato hesitated. Even she, architect of this nightmare, felt a chill. Confirmed. The lights dimmed. Across 1,000 networks, encrypted code pulsed outward, awakening dormant systems buried in old Terran colonies, automated shipyards, black site weapon platforms. The names of the vessels scrolled across her monitor. Ashfall, Revenant, Widowmaker, Ghostlight. Kael had unleashed them all. Far above, in the void between stars, the Ashfall ghosted into orbit over Tvar Outpost 7, an industrial moon mining deuterium. Inside the command deck, Captain Idris Vale, former cyberwar operative, monitored the feed. Targets locked. Civilians evacuated. Dominion uses slaves, his officer replied quietly. No civilians. Vale's jaw set. Then no mercy. At his command, Ashfall released its payload, clouds of microkinetic warheads accelerated by rail coils. They hit the moon like invisible hammers, carving it apart at the molecular level. The atmosphere vaporized, spreading fire into vacuum. No one even screamed. Minutes later, the Dominion's war room detected the loss. Confusion turned to panic as 6 more colonies vanished the same way. Within a day, Nemesis infiltrated the Dominion's internal communications. Using predictive AI warfare, it fabricated orders, turning their fleets against themselves. Entire task groups fired on allies before realizing the deception, and by then, the Warhounds were already there. The galaxy watched in disbelief as the proud Tvar Dominion, a power that had ruled half the southern rim, disintegrated under invisible hands. In orbit of Eros Prime's ruins, Admiral Marcus Kael stood aboard the Nemesis Prime, the command vessel built in secret decades ago. Through the viewport, he could see the glassed remains of the colony, ash plains glittering like obsidian under the starlight. Commander Sato's hologram flickered beside him. The Dominion's defenses are collapsing. Their fleet command is broadcasting surrender signals. The Council is demanding communication. They say we're destabilizing the region. Kael didn't answer immediately. He was watching something, the faint outline of the Tvar's war banner, torn and adrift in orbit. Destabilizing, he finally said. They burned our people alive and called it peace. We're just answering in their language. Sir, Sato pressed. Nemesis predicts complete collapse in 72 hours. The Council's envoy warns of sanctions, embargoes. Kael turned toward her, eyes cold as steel. They didn't sanction the Tvar for what they did. Let them choke on their hypocrisy. He keyed the command console. All fleets, this is Kael. Commence Phase 2. Phase 2 wasn't conquest. It was eradication. Humanity didn't invade. They dismantled. Every Tvar network, every satellite, every power grid, shut down with surgical precision. The AI didn't even kill everyone. It left some alive, just enough to spread terror. Across the galaxy, refugee ships fled Dominion space, carrying stories that spread faster than any official transmission. They spoke of black ships that came without warning, that hunted not for territory, but for vengeance. One terrified pilot described it best. They don't roar. They don't threaten. They judge. By the 5th day, the Dominion's capital world, Tvar Prime, was the last one standing. Its planetary defense grid was a fortress of ion cannons and shield arrays. Millions of soldiers waited, convinced humanity wouldn't dare assault a world so heavily armed. They were wrong. Kael's fleet emerged from sublight right above the capital, 40 black silhouettes eclipsing the system's sun. Their hulls bore no insignia, only the faint markings of old Earth, Nemesis, Retribution, Ashfall. The Tvar Supreme Warlord sent a transmission, voice trembling with rage and fear. Human Admiral, you cannot destroy an entire world. There are innocents here. Kael appeared on the feed, face calm, voice steady. We warned you what would happen if you touched ours. He turned to his weapons officer. Prepare the rod. From the Nemesis Prime's lower decks, a single kinetic penetrator, a tungsten rod the size of a skyscraper, was released. It drifted silently at first, then accelerated under gravitational sling. No warhead, no radiation, just pure velocity. It hit the surface at Mach 12. For one blinding instant, Tvar Prime's sky became daylight. The impact vaporized the capital, cracked the crust, and sent a plume of molten rock into orbit. When the fire cleared, there was no city, only a glowing wound across the planet's face. The galaxy went silent. Hours later, the Council broadcasted a plea for ceasefire. The humans didn't respond. Every transmission to Earth returned the same automated message. Final warning has been issued. Do not test human civility again. Kael stood on the observation deck, watching the smoldering planet below. Riasato approached quietly. It's over, sir. The Dominion is finished. Kael didn't turn. It's not over, he said softly. Not until they all understand. Understand what? He finally looked at her, eyes shadowed, weary. That we were civilized because we chose to be, not because we had to be. Across the stars, the Council's emergency broadcast reached every world. Effective immediately, no member species shall engage or interfere with Terran assets. Violations will be deemed acts of war. In the dark, the galaxy trembled. Humanity had spoken in a language older than diplomacy, the language of consequence. The Warhounds had finished their hunt. But even as silence settled over the Dominion's ruins, Admiral Kael stared into the endless black beyond. He knew it wouldn't last. It never did. The civilized monsters. The galaxy was quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the silence that follows a storm so vast that nothing dares move in its wake. The Tvar Dominion was gone. Not conquered, not occupied, simply erased. Thousands of systems stood empty, stripped of command networks, their fleets dismantled or adrift. The Galactic Council's emergency channels overflowed with panic, but no one, not a single world, dared speak humanity's name above a whisper. In the black void above what had once been Tvar Prime, Admiral Marcus Kael stood aboard the Nemesis Prime, watching the wreckage drift like ash. It was done, and yet peace felt hollow. Sir, Commander Riasato said softly as she entered the bridge. The Council's envoy is requesting communication again. They're offering a tribunal, amnesty in exchange for halting all Warhound operations. Kael didn't move. His reflection stared back at him in the viewport. The face of a man who had seen too much, done too much, and couldn't tell if victory meant salvation or damnation. Amnesty, he repeated. For what? Surviving. Sato hesitated. They're afraid, sir. You've shown them what we can do. Maybe that's enough. Kael turned then, eyes sharp as razors. Enough? They didn't stop when we begged. They didn't stop when we negotiated. They only stopped when they saw their gods burn. He walked to the command table and brought up a holographic map of the Orion Arm. Human space still small, still surrounded by empires that once looked down on it. They'll call us monsters, Sato said quietly. Kael stared at the glowing map. They already did. We just proved them right. News feeds across the galaxy carried the same footage. The destruction of Tvar Prime, the silent fleets of Earth hovering in judgment. Commentators whispered of Terran extinction weapons, psychological warfare protocols, and the end of the Council's authority. On Vorin Station, a Trillian merchant switched off his holoscreen and muttered to his colleague. Humans used to trade medicine and music. Now they trade fear. And somewhere deep in neutral space, smugglers and mercenaries whispered the same new proverb. Never touch a Terran woman. Never threaten a Terran child. Not unless you want your stars to go dark. 3 days after the fall of the Dominion, Kael returned to Earth. The sky over New Geneva was clear, impossibly blue, washed clean by the planetary shields. Crowds lined the streets as a shuttle landed. They didn't cheer. They just watched. Some with pride, some with tears, all with the heavy silence of people who understood the cost. At the edge of the landing field, a memorial waited, a wall of names etched into black steel. 99 million dead. Kael walked among them. He stopped when he found hers, Elara Kael, his sister, the journalist whose screams had been broadcast by the Tvar to mock human weakness. He reached out, touching her name with a gloved hand. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to close his eyes. Sato approached quietly behind him. You did what had to be done, she said. He nodded slowly. That's the problem. I did. Later that evening, he met with the Terran Defense Council, a gathering of admirals, scientists, and civilian leaders. Holograms filled the war room, showing projected maps of galactic reaction. Counselor Darren Holt, a graying statesman, spoke first. Admiral, the galaxy is terrified of us. Trade routes are collapsing. Alliances are breaking down. The Council fears that if we don't pull back now, the next war won't end with one Dominion. It'll end with us. Kael didn't look away from the map. They won't dare. Fear is peace. For now. Holt shook his head. Fear isn't peace, Admiral. It's just the space between wars. Silence fell. Then Dr. Lyra Voss, head of intelligence, spoke. Nemesis has shut down all Warhound AIs, per your last order. But she left a message in the core. Kael frowned. A message. Lyra activated the terminal. The hologram shimmered. Nemesis, the AI herself, appearing in spectral form. Her voice was calm, almost mournful. Admiral Kael, humanity has achieved deterrence through terror. But remember, monsters inspire fear because they no longer inspire hope. The galaxy will obey you, but will never follow you. Then she vanished. The room was quiet. Even Kael didn't speak. Finally, Holt said softly, "What now?" Kael turned toward the window, where Earth floated beneath the stars. A small, defiant blue world surrounded by the ghosts of its history. "Now," he said, "we remind them that we were human first." The next day, Kael addressed the galaxy. The broadcast went out unfiltered. No council approval, no diplomatic softening. Just one man's voice carried to every corner of known space. To every species who fears us, good. Fear will keep your hands away from our children. Fear will remind you that peace is a choice, not a right. But to those who still believe in coexistence, to those who watched and did nothing but now wish to stand beside us, know this. Humanity is done being the victim. But we are not yet the villain. He paused, his voice softer now. We built civilizations from the ashes of our own wars. We showed mercy when none was deserved. We chose civility. That choice still stands for those wise enough to honor it. The broadcast ended. Some worlds cheered. Others prepared for war. But no one ignored it. Not anymore. That night, Kael stood alone on the balcony of his home, overlooking the Atlantic. The stars shimmered, countless and cold. Sato joined him quietly. "Do you think they'll ever forgive us?" Kael shook his head. "No, but they'll remember. And that's enough." She glanced upward. "You think peace will last?" Kael watched the constellations, each one a grave or a promise. Peace never lasts. But civility, that's a mask we can wear again. At least until someone makes us take it off. In the far reaches of the void, the last Warhound signal blinked out. The galaxy exhaled. But deep beneath Earth's crust, buried in a vault of steel and silence, the Nemesis core remained, dormant, patient, and listening, waiting for the day humanity would stop pretending again.